Welcome back to the Manor Park Classics YouTube channel. We're going to do some exciting things. This is the Mythbusters. This is the stuff that helps you to learn about classic cars and what you need to do to them. And I'm joined today by my good friend, great guitarist, and the brains behind Castrol Classic here in the UK, David Sculthorpe. David, thank you for coming today.
Pleasure, always.
We're going to try and help people to understand the important role of oils and fluids in their classic car. What's lovely about Manor Park, we see a lot of people very much for the first time buying their first classic car. They've always wanted one, they're buying their dream, but they've been used to running a modern car and how easy that is. It isn't always the case with classics, is it? They need different oils, different fluids, different coolants, different greases. But let's talk about the basics. Why does an old car need a different oil from a modern car? What are the basic mechanical differences?
A modern car will have a high pressure oil pump, so therefore it will be tending to use a thinner multigrade oil at much higher pressure. And if you put that in an old car, if it's fitted with an oil pressure gauge, you'll find that that oil pressure gauge will fluctuate because it will pulse, because the thin oil is just pulsing with the oil pump. It doesn't need that. The older engine has bigger galleries, it's much coarser engineering. It was as fine as they had in the day, but it's nowhere near as sophisticated as we've got now. So basically, you really need an oil which is going to take up those little imperfections and still hold all its muscle together to help the engine to run quietly and smoothly. So really, old oils for old engines. I say old oils, I need to qualify that. These are not just the old recipes that were there in the day. These are the modern formulations for older engines. So it's been designed with all the latest technology, but with the older engine in mind, and therefore it's absolutely ideal and will make your engine run better than the car ever did when it was new.
Here's a question then. Say I've bought my Classic from Manor Park, I'm going to get it home, I'm going to give it a service, and I'm just going to go and buy a high quality multi-grade or synthetic oil from my local accessory shop. What's the worst thing that can happen? Why shouldn't I do that?
The worst thing that will happen will not be that your engine breaks down or something horrible like that happens, but it will be noisier because it will have a very thin oil rushing around inside it, and it will not perform in the way it's supposed to, because you get a degree of resistance in with the thicker oil as well, and really that you're not using the best thing it should be. I think what you need to do is trust your instincts. You've been to Manor Park Classics, you've bought yourself an older car, say a car of the mid-70s, and what would you want to do if you bought a brand new car? You'd get your handbook out, you'd have a look inside and say, what oil do I need to put in this car, or what oil should I check that my main dealer is going to be putting in this car, because I want to know what's going on. I've just spent a lot of money on this. The same thing applies with your Classic. You look at in the handbook, it will tell you you need to use Castrol XL, you can need Castrol XL 2050.
But what if it doesn't have a handbook? Because a lot of cars here do have book packs, but not everything has a handbook.
Well, we've answered that one. We've been putting a lot of work into our oil finder, so if you go onto our website, www.classicoils.co.uk, you will find Oil Finder, put your year and car in there, and it will tell you which oil to fit in the engine, the gearbox, the back axle, the steering box if it's got one, and how much of each of those you want. If you have a really technical question, please phone our technical sales guys who'll be more than happy to answer questions, which they do for some very notable collections around the countryside, so I'm sure you won't have a question they haven't had before.
Yeah, which is not noticeable.
Oh, it is.
How often should we be changing our oil though, David? Because obviously the manufacturer's going to say one thing, but that was generally for a car that was then being used all the time. Now, if we're honest, us collectors, cars sit in the corner sometimes
they do.
for months at a time.
Indeed.
They shouldn't, but they do.
Yeah.
So if you've got a car that's in a collection, therefore it's being used less, so it's your high days and holidays car, what should we do? What's a good crack to keep it healthy and happy?
I would say go by time rather than mileage, and say every 12 months change your oil, and when you do so it will cost you very little extra. Change the filter as well, so that everything circulating within the oil is within the engine is as clean as it can possibly be, and that will give you the smoothest running and the best life from your engine. If, however, I remember selling some oil to somebody who just had a brand new engine put in his V8 MG, and he covered 20,000 miles in the first year. So in doing so, it was a brand new engine, it was 500 miles, changed the oil, 6,000 miles, and every 6,000 miles, if you're really using your, campaigning your MG and using it or classic car every day. I think if you were going on to something like a rally into a special climate, and there's an awful lot of this happening at the moment where people are going on to, you know, exotic trips across to Corsica or Singapore or anywhere else, you really do need to just have a look at the conditions that the car's going to be expected to perform under. And if you're in any doubt, please just give us a call.
Right, so we know which oil to use. So what has changed then on a classic car? If I get my car from the auction, take it home, what would be the process of jobs I should do on a car that I don't know? Even if the history says it's had a service, what would be 3 or 4 great jobs I should do to a new purchase, a new acquisition?
Right, I would definitely be changing all the fluids just so that you know what you've got. You will have no doubt be driving.
How much would it cost? Give us a rough indication. So I've maybe spent 6 or 7 grand on a nice car.
Yeah.
If I do engine, gearbox, axle, maybe a couple of greases, what would I be spending at retail?
£80.
So it's nothing, is it really?
No.
As an insurance policy.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've
And
just
the filters
spent
are 10 or 15 quid maybe.
not even that, honestly. Most classic car filters, £5 to £6, £7, something like that. They really are very cheap to maintain, and they won't depreciate. So really the servicing side of it is for nothing. Just to answer your question, what I would do is I would change the oil, even if it says it's been serviced, because you do not know what oil has gone in there. And if you get yourself the proper grade of oil for your car, change it, change the filter, then go to your gearbox.
It's also quite a nice bonding moment, I think. Whenever I get a new car, I like to take it home and give it a wash, then you find out where all the chips and marks are. Like to drop all the fluids, because then you can see what condition it's in.
Yeah.
'Cause even if it has a specialist service history, and that's with a very reputable specialist, if you know, and you've done it, and your hands have been on it, it's just that peace of mind, isn't it? You know what it is, what you're working with, and if there's any problems.
Absolutely.
Because you'll see things like wear metals sometimes, won't you, or on a sump plug.
Yeah,
And if you take it out, then you know, and that's almost like an early warning. It's like a health check on your car.
You can see things happening. Do the gearbox and the back axle whilst you're at it.
Exactly.
Because with the gearbox, most people will go just top the gearbox up at every service. But for what little it will cost, get rid of all that oil, put some new oil in it of exactly the right grade, and then, you know, having driven home and found that your gearbox wasn't noisy, you can then be looking after it, and you won't put mileage on it that will damage that gearbox. And I can tell you, a gearbox is a very expensive thing to have taken out of the car, reconditioned, and put back in the car. You know,
it's a lot more than 80 quid, isn't it?
Oh, I think you'd probably be looking at £1,500 to £2,000. Don't let that frighten anybody off, because if you bought the car and the gearbox is sound and you look after it, you're most unlikely to come across those problems. But it does hinge on looking after it, and the same with the back axle.
So here's a question then. Here's a question. So I've just bought the car. I'm new to the classic car world. I'm not feeling confident to do this myself.
Yeah.
How easy are you going to be to find a classic car specialist that would do that work for me?
You would find any. If you came up with the oils and took it to any garage, they would do those jobs for you. The other things I would add on to that is to change the spark plugs, find out what the correct spark plugs are, change those over, and if it is an older classic where it's still using the points and the condenser and the coil and all of those things, get those all changed, but be sure to use very, very reputable suppliers for those. You do not want to be fitting Chinese manufactured poor quality points and condensers in there, because that buys you into, you know, a whole load of trouble that is entirely avoidable. So just do those things, and then go around with a general grease up for the prop shaft, and also things like door hinges and things like that. Again, as Paul says, it helps you bond with the car. You'll know if your door hinges are in good condition. If they're not, you think, well, that's a job for the future, but it's not a priority. You've always got a little bit of driving, use of the car lined up, but you've also got your little essential maintenance jobs coming along as and when you've got time to do them, to maintain the car and just keep it running so it's ready for you to enjoy when the summer arrives.
Good advice, mate.